everybody, I am here today with Louisa Pateman, who is a very good friend of mine. I've known her for very many years, and she has taken the plunge and written a memoir about her life. And I'm really excited to introduce it to you. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how inspiring it is and how empowering the story is for all of those women out there who think that they have a certain life path that they have to follow. So what I would like to do is introduce Louisa to you and get her to tell you a little bit about her story and a little bit about herself, and then we'll have a bit of a chat about it. The book is called Single Again and Again and Again, and it's a fantastic story, so I recommend you all go out and read it. So Louisa, tell me a little bit about yourself and tell me why you decided to write the book.
Okay, well, thanks for having me here and thanks for asking me these questions. So, basically, I'm now in my 40s. I've lived an interesting life, but it never turned out the way I planned it to turn out, right? So,
I hear that a lot.
So basically, I grew up as a little girl, and like every other little girl, I had a dream of happily ever after. Now, you know, that came from fairy tales, it came from society, it came from my family, constant pressure from my family. Settle down, have kids.
Yep.
And so it was kind of embedded within me that to be a success in life, I would grow up, I would get married, and I would have kids.
I think a lot of us thought that.
Yeah, and look, of course there was kind of this unspoken suggestion that you'd get a job along the way, but it was never really talked about. What was talked about was basically you would get married and you'd have kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I went into my teens and my 20s all excited, and I started developing these life plans because I'm quite organised.
Yes, you are.
And
I can vouch for that, everybody.
And so I wrote these life plans about how my life would pan out. And how my life would pan out involved how I was brought up to believe that, you know, success was getting married and having children. So I had these life plans, and I had in my head that 30 was old. You know, so back in the day, now I'm in my 40s, but back in the day, 30 was considered old. And I wanted to have kids and be married basically by the age of 30. So
yeah, I agree. I actually felt like I was wanting to have children early as well, and it didn't happen for me that way either. So I can really empathise and I feel how you were feeling as well, which is why the book resonated so well with me.
Yeah. And so I went through, I've got a really strong friendship with a lot of my girlfriends, including yourself, and I went through my 20s spending a lot of time with the girlfriends and having a lot of fun times. But in the back of my mind, there was always this notion that I want to settle down and get married and have kids. And unfortunately, I just kept dating duds. Well, I call them duds. They're actually quite nice guys, and I have no bitterness, and I certainly have learnt a lot and learnt a lot about myself.
Yeah, and they make you who you are today.
Exactly,
right?
And I don't regret anything.
No,
I just really struggled to find the right person, my soulmate. You know, this concept of a soulmate.
Yes,
and so I really struggled, and my friends around me were all starting to partner up, and they were starting to get married and have children themselves. And the more that happened, the harder I found it when I was single. So
I was in the same boat.
Yeah, and I felt like an outcast.
You do.
I really felt like there was this stigma attached to being single. You know, it's like in my head I believed I was failing. You know, I had my life plan and I was constantly revising my life plan, because I wanted this dream. I wanted this happily ever after dream that had been there for so many years.
Yeah, and you watch all your friends get married and you get invited as a single.
Exactly.
And it's hard.
Exactly.
You get put at the single table at the wedding.
Exactly. You are treated like a misfit. It's like you don't fit. And you're accepted by your friends, but you're still different.
You feel like you're different, don't you?
You feel like you're different. And friends would ask me all the time, so who do you like? What, you know, are you dating anyone? Well, they'd know if I was dating someone. But it was always this constant pressure of, well, you must like someone, you must be chasing someone, because clearly that's what your purpose is, you know, about. It's is to get married and
why would you want to be single when you can have a partner?
I really struggled with the notion of going out and living a life without my soulmate. So, but I couldn't sit on the couch pining for a man
Yeah.
And it was a tough decision to get myself out of that situation to actually start living life as a single woman in my 20s and through in my 30s as well. And I did have relationships, as you'll see in my memoir. I've had many, not by choice, but I have had many. And they just didn't come to fruition. They just didn't end up being my lifelong partner for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah.
And so in the book, I go through and I explain how that was for me. So I explain what I felt, the pressure that I felt. And when I got into my 30s, suddenly I had this biological clock ticking.
Yes.
And that became an even greater challenge. So it was hard enough being single amongst my married friends who were having babies. I then became this single person who didn't have babies but had a biological clock saying, quick, you're going to
have those babies.
Exactly, you're going to run out of time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just external, it was now internal as well.
Yeah.
And that happened in my early 30s. And again, you'll read the book and you'll see that I've had an escapade with men, and
there's been some fun times,
interesting journeys, interesting chapters. I've had some colourful times, and there were some very happy moments, and there were some very, very sad moments.
Yeah, of course.
And a lot of heartbreak. And so I came into my 30s, and as I was getting closer to my mid-30s, I was getting more and more desperate. And I felt, I guess and it's hard to describe this because there is a notion of, desperation. And
it's almost like this radar, isn't it, that men have? Oh, she looks desperate. Oh.
Yes. And the older I got it is. And when I got into my 30s, my mid-30s, I may as well have been a piece of wallpaper. Like, I may as well have not been in the room. Men don't date women. Well, good men. Well, in my head, certainly in my experience. Yes, my perception is that good men don't date women in their mid-30s because why would they? They don't need to. There's a lot of time pressure there.
And it puts pressure on the man because he feels like he gets pressured into having a baby sooner than he would like.
Exactly.
And if there's a younger woman out there who's willing to date him who doesn't have that biological clock ticking, he might just pick her instead.
Exactly. And I even canvassed my male friends at the time. And of course I did. And I'm a civil engineer, and I've had a fantastic career, and I've got a lot of male friends.
Yeah.
I'm in the friend zone.
Yeah.
So I'm in the friend zone constantly.
But a great opportunity for you to get some real world feedback.
Exactly.
From men on the ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was very valuable information, albeit not what I wanted to hear, but it was great to have an understanding.
But it helps you make decisions.
It helps me make decisions.
For your future. Yeah.
And so I eventually, coming into my mid-30s, I just didn't see that there were any options. I had this ticking time bomb, and as much as I tried, I was getting more and more desperate to get married and have children as I was getting into my late 30s. From society was pressuring me, my family, my friends, and they were sad for me. It was a real disappointment, and I was struggling myself. I was struggling with my own issues and feelings of failure, and I had all my friends and family around me who were basically saying, "Oh, well, Louisa, you're kind of left on the shelf."
Yeah.
And I really struggled with that concept. And I guess it was just by chance that I stumbled across, the idea that, well, I'm potentially not going to meet someone in time to have children. So, I really should maybe think about going and freezing my eggs. And that's all I really wanted to do at first, was just to freeze my eggs. And I went to the fertility clinic, and the doctor was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I loved him. And he suggested that, I take this solo motherhood path.
Yeah, right.
And at the time, it was just completely foreign. I had never dreamt of being a single mother. I had never aspired to be a single mother. And there is nothing wrong with single mothers. I need to put that out there.
Yeah.
And
there is a stigma.
There is a stigma.
For single mums.
And so I was struggling with this stigma of being single in my mid-30s and childless, to then dealing with potentially going into a situation where there was more stigma, or but different stigma.
I love how society just boxes us into these little places, and they assume things about you because of life circumstances.
And exactly. So through more failed relationships, I wasn't willing to give into that notion straight away.
Yeah.
I was determined and adamant that I was going to get out there, and it was just so hard to give up the dream. It was just really hard to...
So you fought.
I fought really hard. I mean, really hard. And it was just such an embedded notion. Happily ever after was such an embedded notion that had been there for decades by this stage, that I just couldn't shake it. And I talked to other women about this, but no one was travelling my journey. You know,
and you're a strong, you know, empowered woman who has a really great career, and you control a lot of the situations that you're in, but this was just one that... This was the one that was letting you down.
I couldn't do it. Exactly, because it was the one where...
It was you.
It was the one which
looking at failure in the face.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was the one part of my life that I couldn't control because it required another person. So I didn't choose to be single. I didn't choose to be independent. So I've learned to be independent, and I've learned to be resilient.
Yes.
And I didn't choose that path. It
chose you.
It chose me. It happened incidentally. You know, after failed relationship, rejection, you become quite resilient, and you just have to pick yourself up and go on.
Build up that thick skin to keep moving.
And you have this facade. You have this, you know, I've got all my stuff together. Everything's working on the outside, but on the inside, you're struggling. You know, you really are.
Yeah.
Self-worth, self-doubt. Why not me?
Yeah.
Why is everyone else getting their life partner? Why not me?
Yeah.
And so I did really have to deal with that. Having said that, I was presented early on with some situations where my friends were travelling overseas. And they were travelling overseas either meeting their life partner or with their partner.
Yeah.
And I always saw that as such a massive event and such a momentous life, you know, experience, that I wanted to do it with my life partner, my soulmate.
Yeah.
And I really struggled with the fact that they were all having this fun and having this life experience, and I was sitting on the couch at home going, well, I've got no one to go with.
Yeah.
You know, I'm on my own. And so I did end up plucking up the courage to take those trips away and leave the country and leave Australia and start taking some organised tours, if you like, you know, and where other single people were on those journeys.
Yeah.
And so I did become very independent. You know, I did become people.
Yeah, it's hard for me to think about you now as not being independent.
Yes.
So I've known you for a very long time, but I can't remember the days when you weren't that independent, strong woman.
Yes.
So,
but that independent, strong woman came from knock after knock after knock after knock with my relationships.
Yeah.
Fortunately, my career was great, and that was a focus for me, and I'm very proud of that. I just didn't have control over the relationship situation.
Yeah.
And you know, and look, I did date some wonderful guys. Don't get me wrong. You know, I've had some lovely times, but we weren't in the same place. We weren't compatible. It wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I got to this stage with a doctor, and he's making this suggestion, and it took me about 7-8 months to come to terms with it.
Wow. Yeah.
And in that time, I'd had probably my worst relationship.
Yeah.
Not worst as in heartbreak, but worst as in, oh my goodness, I'm now dating someone who would never qualify for my criteria had I been in my 20s.
Yeah.
And then I could see that I was
compromised.
I had compromised so much because I was so desperate at that point in time to get this happily ever after.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was willing to convince myself that this guy, which is known as Towel Guy in the book.
Right, good, yes.
You'll learn that story when you read the book. I was so convinced that I could make it happen, even though he wasn't even close to being compatible.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I see it a lot where women kind of just not give up, but they settle for something that's not right, and then they put up with it for a long time, and they're really unhappy.
Exactly.
And you don't want to be unhappy in your life. You only get to live it once.
You only get to live it once. And I remember thinking with Towel Guy, when I walked out of that, you know, we were together maybe 4 months. I walked out of that thinking, oh my goodness, if I have to wake up to you in 2 years from now, I will be in a mental home. Like I'm sorry, but this is not happiness. This is never going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I was so defeated. I was so defeated and so exhausted by that stage. I'd spent 20 years looking for my soulmate.
Yeah.
Like over a dozen relationships.
Yeah.
you know, effectively.
This
Whether
happens.
Relationships or crushes, you know, at the end of the day, I'd find someone, I'd meet them, I'd, you know, be keen. They just didn't feel the same way for whatever a number of reasons.
It's hard. I hear you.
Exactly, and I feel sorry for the young girls of today, young ladies, where there is internet dating, which I did embark upon.
I did a little bit of dating online myself.
Exactly, and I
with
do
mixed results.
Exactly, and I appreciate all of your advice and your guidance in that period. So that was invaluable.
We've had many conversations about that over the years.
We certainly have. And I guess there's a lot out there that, you know, I wasn't the only woman. And I guess now, looking back, I wasn't the only woman going through this. No. I just felt at the time that I was.
Yes, because we don't talk about it.
No,
we cover it up and we put that mask on every day, and we go out and we put that face on to be the strong.
Our pride.
It is.
Our pride's an amazing thing.
It is, yeah.
And so the pride factor, you know, the status factor, you know, had me convincing people that everything was
I'm good.
All okay.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until years later that I looked back and I realised that so many other women were going through what I was going through, but just different circles of friends. You know?
So why did you write the book then? It's a good segue, I think.
Well, exactly.
Why did you write the memoir?
So my journey ended up, it's a good question. My journey ended up, as you'll read in the book, where I did eventually take that path of single motherhood.
Yeah.
And it was such a difficult decision. Right? However, it was actually my best decision of my life. And you'll read in the book how that came to be and the joys I've had since becoming a mum. And
it hasn't been easy.
It hasn't been easy.
But it's definitely rewarding.
It was the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
And I think as a parent, I know that being a parent isn't easy when you have a partner.
Exactly.
So, you know, there's this Instagram, you know, lifestyle that people portray, but the reality is that parenting is tough.
It's tough.
Living life is tough.
It's tough.
No one tells the stories of the hard times. They always just put that positive message out there, and people are not putting that real, you know, this is what really happens in people's lives.
There's no sleep. There's nappy changing.
Exactly.
You know, there is yelling from time to time, raising your voice.
Oh, there's a little bit of that.
There's a little bit of that.
You're not alone on that one.
And so when I went down that journey, I made a conscious decision, having had to reconcile in my head that this was now going to be my life path, which was a very difficult thing to do, having spent 20 years chasing a life plan and believing that I would have a soulmate and believing that I would have what everyone else in society had, supposedly had, that it was really tough. And I decided to put it out there and say, okay, I'm not going to accept people's questioning me on it. I'm just going to say, look, this is my circumstance. I'm 37 at the time. I'm single. I haven't found the right one.
Yeah.
And I do want to, you know, have my own biological children.
Yeah.
And of course,
and adoption is not really an easy option in Australia. And especially for a single person. It's difficult for anyone who's in that situation, but most stories I've heard about adoption are that even if you're in a committed long-term relationship, adoption is difficult unless you can prove that you can't physically have children.
It's a long journey.
And a lot of people then end up going overseas for it, so it's not really, it's not a viable option for a lot of people in Australia.
It never entered my head, in all honesty. And I really wanted this opportunity. Having said I wanted the opportunity, it took me a long time to get to that.
Yeah.
You know, so it took me a long time to reconcile. So having gone down that path, I was really surprised at how many people were supportive.
Yeah.
And then I found that so many people came to me and said, Louisa, are you okay if you talk to my sister about this? Are you okay if you talk to my niece?
Yeah.
You know, or my daughter's going through something similar, you know, in terms of her age and not being able to find anyone. Are you able to, you know, maybe give her a phone call?
Yeah.
I even had a work colleague who I didn't know very well ask me if I'd FaceTime his sister in the United States.
Wow.
You know, so I was getting all these random requests to just talk about it.
Yeah.
And that inspired me to go, you know what, I need to tell my story. And and it was difficult at first because my son, I went down that path, I had a beautiful boy and Nicholas, and I was reluctant at first about the impact it might have. So I really had to think a lot about writing it.
Yeah.
But I've enjoyed writing my memoir. And so really I just wanted for people to be able to relate. You know, so I've gone down this path. I'm a single mother by choice. It 100% is the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
I'm happier now than I have ever been.
Yeah.
And I think back now to when I was in my 20s and 30s and struggling to find my soulmate.
And I was right there with you.
Yes. And it was so much energy, you know, so much focus in the back of my mind, even as a, you know, subconsciously, it was always there. Yes. Having taken the path of solo motherhood, it was like I was free, you know.
Yeah.
And
it relieves that pressure that's on you to then have to have a child.
Exactly. And so,
and it just shows you that, and shows everybody out there that there's not just one road to happiness.
Exactly.
There's multiple roads. There's many roads that can take you to your happy place.
Yep. It took me a long time to reconcile that I didn't get my happily ever after.
Yet.
Yeah, well, exactly. But I've decided to change the definition. You know, society's definition of happily ever after was not my happily ever after.
Great.
You know, and so I'm now very happy, you know, a happy single mother.
Yeah, great.
And you know, if someone out there I come across and our paths cross and they're the right person, then great. But I'm not looking for it now.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have that energy where I feel the need to go and, you know, tick off a box and go down that path because society has deemed that that's what success is. And
it's a good feeling, isn't it? When it relieves the stress, and I think your health is better for it as well, and you just feel like a different person.
So here I am. So I've written the book.
Amazing. And I loved the book, by the way.
Thank you.
It was so inspiring, and I felt like it was almost my story as well, because, you know, you and I have been through a lot together, and I know that we went out and partied a bit together, and, you know, it was a hard journey for both of us, and we've had different paths, but I think we're both in a really good place.
Yep.
And both of us are kind of single parents now, so
yes, I know.
You know, we've ended up kind of back on the same
path. Exactly. Just different ways to get to the same.
It is.
And I just wanted people to feel like they can relate. You know, for those women out there that are in their 30s that are struggling, but also for young women coming through, or young ladies, that there are other paths. That there isn't just this one set.
And it's important for girls in their late teens, early 20s as well to hear the message, because they're the ones who are going to feel that pressure later. And if they get the message early, they can change that, and it can be a different outcome for them.
And I was fortunate enough to travel overseas and have some wonderful experiences as a single woman in my 20s and 30s. And I just want people, you know, women out there who are struggling to know that still go and have a wonderful life. You don't need to have a partner. You can still, I now look back and I reminisce my girlfriends, my travel, my career, and I'm so grateful for those.
Yeah.
And I've had some wonderful experiences. They just weren't with my soulmate.
Yeah, exactly. So what are the key messages of the book, and what do you want our audience to really understand about what's in the book?
So effectively, I really love for people to understand how much pressure is put onto young girls to get their happily ever after. This comes from fairy tales, it comes from society and family and friends.
Cinderella story.
Exactly. And so I'd really like people to take home that there is an enormous amount of pressure. And it doesn't do us any good. And it's hard enough trying to find someone who is compatible. It's hard enough going through rejection without that pressure in the background that, you've got to do it. Oh, and by the way, this is your definition of success in life. And you've got this biological clock to come with it. You've got this time limit. and so if that pressure was removed, it would certainly have benefited me had I not had that pressure in my 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
And just knowing that this is a reality. I guess, one, having the courage to be single. I now have had sadly so many failed relationships that I know I don't have to accept something that is not making me happy.
Yeah.
Because I am able to be single. I am independent. I'm resilient. And, I have the courage now to be single.
Yeah.
To be able to find something that's actually going to be worthwhile. And
it's amazing.
And being single is actually a good place to be.
Yeah.
It's not a negative. Being single is not a negative.
Yeah.
And so I guess, moving forward that, there's different journeys and there's different ways to happiness. And I just hope that, there are some women out there who find my book, inspirational. And even if there's just one woman who potentially feels like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
And then they go onto a path of happiness or single motherhood by choice.
Yeah.
Then I feel that I'm, writing
You've done your job.
I've done my job.
Yeah. And I would like to just say, everybody go out and get the book. It's called Single Again and Again and Again. And thank you for choosing me to sit here and have a chat with you today. It's been so much fun. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I have.
As much as I have.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louisa.
Oh, thank you.